declarative programming with Velo, and I'll try to explain what is declarative programming and why should we do it, and we will see in the next on the on the presentation. Anyway, I want to start with, first of all, thank you all for coming. We do not take it for granted, and we appreciate you so much for joining, for wanting to hear out what we have to say about our latest development, about what's going on a little bit inside Velo. We care so much about like your opinion, and your feedback is much appreciated. So please, if you have any feedback, don't hesitate to send it our way, and we will show you at the end of the day how you can do and contribute to this project. And I'll start with introducing myself. So, okay, oops, this is not me. Let's try to fix it real quick. Okay, great. Grace knows that Greek already, so I'm sorry if anyone saw it before, but never mind. Okay, so my name is Ofir. I'm not writing for mainframes, but I am writing a lot of decks and spreadsheets, but I like the most to write side projects. Of course, all of my side projects are on Velo, and not just side projects, but a lot of my side projects are from Velo. But in my day-to-day jobs, I unfortunately write spreadsheets more than I write code, but I like it as well. I'm not a bar musician, but I am a bar dependent. And believe it or not, I am a princess daughter tutor, namely the princess is my sister, and I tutor her daughter. I'm also a part of the Velo R&D team, which I like a lot. I love it. I love the product. I love the team. I love the community. And I hope you feel the same. And on the right here, you can see Chloe, which is really cute. Okay, so I want to start and talk to you about programming models. So what is a programming model? A programming model is an execution model coupled to an API or particular pattern of code. Well, this seems maybe a little bit vague or unclear, so I'll try to like work it down and give you some real life examples. So let's talk about Velo programming model. Okay, first we have the $W. This is a particular API that coupled to our pattern of code, right? And we use the $W for interacting with the elements on the stage. We also have some special files, for example, the jobs.config to configure the scheduled jobs that will run anonymously, like autonomously in the backend whenever you scheduled it. We have the .js W files for client-server communication to make it easy without its abstraction over the network layer and all of that. I'm sure you are all aware of it. And if not, I really urge you to look it up. It's really cool. If you want to expose REST API, we have the HTTP functions.js files. We also have the events.js files. It's a special file for listening to Wix vertical data events. For example, an item was added to a cart or something like that. There was a checkout, there was any event basically that might be interested to you. You can register it in the events.js. And lastly, we have the data.js, which is similar to the events, but for the database commands. So for example, you can register your own function whenever before an insert happens in a specific collection. Or you can also register after a record is being deleted or updated and such. Today, I want to focus only on the $W part of the Velo programming model. And we will get that in a minute. We will get there in a minute. Before that, I want to see a raise of hands you don't have your video, but let's imagine. Who here likes micromanagement? Nah, no one likes it, right? But why? Why we don't like micromanagers? Because a bad manager's, like, let's start with the good, right? So a good manager tells you what they want, right? And a bad manager tells you how they want it done, and like more often than not, like exactly how they want it done, right? And that's something we don't really like. I'll try to give another example. Let's talk about scrambled eggs, okay? So we have the how part, which is also named the imperative part. So I can tell you, okay, Grace, can you please open the fridge, take out 2 eggs, open the drawer, take out the bowl, break the eggs into a bowl, and so on and so forth, right? I can also ask Grace, like, can you please make scrambled eggs? And that's the focus on the what, right? So I hope it's clear. And believe it or not, but programming, it's the same. We have a declarative programming style, which is telling the program what it's supposed to do. And we have imperative programming style, which is telling the program how it should do something or everything, basically. I want us to better understand the difference between imperative programming and declarative programming. And for that, I want to start with the imperative programming, because that's what we currently know when we work with Velo. We have Velo is currently imperative programming style. Okay, so let's do a short demo. Okay, I created a website and I've built this amazing counter. Okay, really simple one. We have 2 buttons, 1 increment, 1 decrement, and a text with the ID counter. So we'll start off simple. We define the counter to equal to 0, and we're adding an on-click event handler to increment and an on-click event handler on decrement. And we set the text of the counter to be either like the counter ++ or counter -. Let's see if it works. Amazing. We have a counter. So right off the bat, there's something, even though it's like looks like really clean code and pretty straightforward, there's something here I don't like, and we'll get to it like a bit later, but I have to set the text twice, right? It seems like kind of duplicate. Even the IDE shows it when I mark it, it says that this part is duplicated. But let's continue, we'll see it next. So the next step, I want to add the progress bar, maybe to add some visual representation for the counter value, right? So I added a progress bar element, and on increment, I change the progress bar value to be the counter. So let's see if that works. Okay, so it looks like it's working. Let's decrement a few numbers. Oh, we have a bug. Okay, so only when I increment, I can see it changing dynamically, but when I decrement, I don't see the progress bar changing, and the next time I will increment, it will reset to the right place. Why is that? Obviously, I forgot to update the progress bar when I decremented, so we can fix that easily, right? We'll just do a function and update the progress bar whenever we decrement as well. Let's see if that works. Okay, looks good. So again, something here a little bit starts to bug me. to bug me, but we'll get to it later. Next step is, let's say I want to show the counter value on a different element. Maybe it's something like, let's imagine the counter represents the number of live visitors on the site. So maybe I want to show it also, like I want to have a specific page of like showing the list of all the live visitors and what page are they on and what are they doing or whatever. And I also want to show it on every page on the header. Again, what I need to do, I need to add an element to the stage, and then not to forget to update it whenever I'm incrementing and whenever I'm decrementing. So now we will go to the part of the duplicate code. So until now, maybe I could let it slide, but now it like emerges out of the code that something here really duplicate, right? And maybe duplicate code is the one thing that I really like when I do code reviews. This is the thing that I look for the most, because the code duplication is, in my opinion, is the worst. Why? Because like, first of all, it makes the code longer, and we don't like long files and long functions. And maybe the more important reason is that it's much more prone for errors. So think about it. Let's say I'm duplicating a specific logic, and then there's a bug in this specific logic. So when I go out to fix it, I have a scenario, I go to the scenario and I see what's wrong and I fix the bug. But did I really fix the bug? Because if the code is duplicated, I might have fixed it on one place, and I totally missed that this code is duplicated, and this bug still exists, but in another scenario, and I might encounter it like later on. So whenever I can, like almost 100% of the time, because there is no excuse for code duplication, I avoid it. So let's avoid it. We don't need to write declarative code to avoid it. We can do it in imperative style. So I avoided it now. What I did, I extracted all of the UI logic to a function called render. And please ask in the chat any questions, like if you have questions about the code, or if it's, I'm sorry, I didn't increase the font, but like if you have anything, it's better to ask it now, if it's related to the code that I'm writing. So I extracted a function render, and I've put all of the UI logic, so all of the stuff that needs to be updated once the counter is changed. And then on increment, I just increment the counter and I call render. And on decrement, I decrement the counter and I call render. So there's less code duplication, but I need to remember every time, whenever I change the counter, to call render, right? It won't happen by itself. If somehow there will be another place when I touch the counter and I won't call render, things won't be up to date. Let's continue and complicate it a little bit more, because why not, right? Life is not always simple. What I want to do here. So here I want to do, so let's say this counter, I don't like to increment by one. Let's say after a certain point, I want to increment it by a lot. So every step of the counter will count as 5. Maybe if it's like traffic on site, I don't want to like sample my site every second. I want to sample my site every minute or so. So I won't hurt performance. So what did I do here? I introduced a new variable, called it step. And on increment, I calculate step. If the counter is greater or equal than 7, the step will be 5, otherwise 1. And again, on decrement, if the counter equal or bigger than 7, it will be 5, otherwise 1. And the rest is the same. Instead of counter plus plus, I do counter plus equal step. I increment the counter with step. Let's see if it works. So 7, 12, 17, 22. Great. Amazing. Again, there's code duplication here. I should probably extract it to another function. I wouldn't use render. Why not render? Because render is like for UI logic, and I don't consider step to be the UI logic. I consider step to be the business logic. So I want to separate the both, like to be decouple the UI and business logic. And that's why I would probably use another function, something like calculate step or something, and I will call the render function and calculate step whenever I'm incrementing or decrementing. Last thing before we will go, before we will continue, let's say I have an alert, an indication when there's high traffic on the site. And I want to show this high traffic alert whenever I'm having high traffic on the site. So what did I do here? Again, I added an element, traffic. I set the text to be, if counter is bigger than 10, bigger or equal, let's set the text to high traffic, otherwise empty text. And that's it, basically. I just edit it once. And let's see if it works. So it doesn't look like it's working because the counter is 0 and I can see the high traffic. But if I click 1, 2, 3, 4, I don't see it. And if it's bigger than 10, I see it again. So it's kind of working, but it's not working properly, right? The reason is that I've set a default value for this text element to be high traffic. And this code will only happen on render, but there is no render in the beginning. So one option is just to delete, to set the default text to an empty string. But I wouldn't recommend that because you will miss it when you're editing the site, and then you won't know, you might put some element on top of it. So I wouldn't do that. Another way is, of course, using show and hide. And another way is just to call the render in the beginning. This should fix it. So it looks like it's working. Great. Again, so there's a lot of solutions for that specific problem, but I chose that one. And we're starting to see like a pattern emerges that basically every time I do something on the screen, I usually want to call render. And render in real life and in real projects will probably get messier and messier, and it will contain maybe some logic, maybe only UI logic. I don't know if this is considered UI or not. You know, it's like starting to be a little bit messy. Okay, so I hope I passed on like the idea of what is imperative programming, which is basically telling the software every time on everything that happens, what it should do like from scratch. Okay. So can we do something about it? Obviously, yes, otherwise I wouldn't show you all of the frustration points that we encounter in Velo. And what I want to show you today is a library that we wrote. And I know there's a lot of other people, I think maybe Quentin here as well wrote a library that is similar. So there are a lot of solutions for that, and we love it. We love the idea that people wrote other solutions. There are also other solutions that were written also inside of Wix, namely Velo React, which is kind of the same thing, but using React. So this is really, really great. It means that the problem is a true problem if several people is trying to solve it. And hopefully we will see it solved in the future. So you can actually start from today. I will go over the docs later in the presentation, but I will say that velo-bind is totally open source. You can see it on GitHub, you can open up issues, feature requests, you can contribute the code. We would be very, very pleased if you'll do that. It's awesome. We really, it's a work in progress, velo-bind, and basically this talk is about, hopefully you will try it out and tell us if it's working for you or not. Okay, so let's see it in action. We'll do a declarative, sorry, the mouse is crazy, declarative programming demo. So for the demo, I will do exactly the same as step 5, but with velo-bind. Okay, so I will try to explain the code line by line. If you have any questions, please ask. First of all, the first thing you need to know about velo-bind is how to install it. So this part is easy. You'll go to the packages tab and add an npm just like any regular npm. Search for @wix/velo-bind and install it. In my case, it's already installed. And that's it. You can use it in your site. Next is what you import from velo-bind. So velo-bind is basically based on top of mobx. What is mobx? Mobx is an open source, very, very popular state management declarative library. And what we did is basically we used mobx as is. We didn't touch anything in mobx. And we added a layer, namely this function, bind function. So it will be much easier to integrate between mobx and velo. And we will see how. So make auto observable is a function from mobx. We didn't name it. This is how it's named. Basically what it does, it makes an observable object. What is an observable object? It's a regular object, but that you can register to events whenever it changes. So let's say it's an object that has a counter. The software or the developer can register an event handler, much like on click, okay, whenever counter is changed. And what mobx is doing really great is it knows whenever the counter changes, and then it knows all of the other elements on the screen that are dependent on the counter. So it will know to update them. And we will see a little bit how it works. So let's continue with the example. So we have, we create an auto observable that has the property counter and then 2 functions. What are these 2 functions? These are called computed functions. What does it mean? It means that it gets computed relatively to the state. Okay, so it doesn't have a state of its own. Like is traffic will return true only when the state counter is bigger or equal than 10. And step will return 5 when the counter is bigger or equal than 7 and 1 otherwise. It's not like an inherent state. If I had a counter number 2, I would have to use it here. Sorry. Okay, because it's not related to counter, because is high traffic and step are related and computed by counter. This is why I wrote them as computed functions. I hope it's clear, but if not, let me know. So I have the state here, and for me, it's a regular object. I can just set the counter, I can call step, it's a getter, so you don't actually need to invoke the function. It just like acts like a property. And this is from JavaScript, it's not something new. So on ready, I get out all of the elements using the bind function. How did I do that? This part is pretty cool actually. So I extract an object, I pass $w to the bind function. I have to do it so it will know what elements are currently on this page. And now I have autocomplete. So you can see like I have all of the elements, and I don't need to use the $W select with the string, and it might look old-fashioned for some. For me, it's like cumbersome. I don't like the $W and give it a string. I much better deal with like objects like that, like this. Progress bar and traffic. And if I'll try to extract XX, I will get an error because there's no element on the page. But let's say I will add a text and I will give it the XX ID. So now, maybe not in the footer, like demo. Yeah, okay, it works. I don't know why it didn't work on the footer, but I'll check it out later. Okay. So remember the difference between how and what. We are now writing in a declarative way, so we will focus on the what. What do I want to do when someone clicks on increment? I want to increase counter with the step, whatever the step may be. It might be 5, 1, I don't care. What do I want to do when someone clicks on decrement? I want to decrease counter with the step. What do I want to do, like to the header counter? I want to set the value text to the string representation of counter. And here we see for the first time, until now, it was very simple, like very similar to what we're used to. But instead of using increment as an object, we would use something like increment on click, right? And give it the same. But text is a little bit different. You can see here that it's a function, and we're used to writing just like whatever, a string and not a function. So why is it a function? Like I told you, whenever the state changes, mobx is smart enough to run these functions again. And it's even smart in the sense of like, it understands that header counter only dependent on the counter. So in my example, if I would put a counter 1 and give it a value of 10, and now I will change count state.counter 1. Let's increase it by 10. This function won't happen. Mobx is smart enough to understand that the text here also only dependent on the counter and not counter 1. So don't worry about performance or anything. It works out of the box, like magic. Again, for counter text, again, for progress bar value, what do I really want? I want the progress bar value to be the state counter, that's it. And as for the traffic text, I want it to be high traffic when the state is high traffic, and an empty string if it's not. Did we see if it works? Let's hope, finger crossed. Amazing, looks good. Okay, any questions about the code here? Any comments? All right. Carry on. So the pros, like the pros part, why should I use velo-bind instead of continuing writing the same code that I'm used to? First of all, it's totally backward compatible. So you saw here that in the middle of the code, which uses velo-bind, I can also write velo-bind, $W, all of the things that I'm used to do, I can do it. It's no problem, and it works together. It's an NPM package. You can either choose to use it or not. You can use it on new pages. You can use it only in part of the pages. It doesn't really matter. So it's easy to use. Basically, you don't have to rewrite your entire website or whatever. It
Oh,
supports, yeah, sure, yes.
we have two questions. I can say them out loud, and if you'd prefer to answer them now, you can, or we can wait till the end. If this is a good time. So the first one is from Kanton. He said, how do you handle promises?
How do I handle promises? Actually, it's a great question because I haven't tried it. I just figure it works. But I will try and we'll let you know. Maybe if we'll have time in the end, we'll try to write a small demo for that. But basically, whenever you change the state, I don't see why it won't work. But because let's say you were doing a network request to a third party by HTTP, and then when the response is when you get it back, you change the state. Whenever you change the state, remember the state is an observable object. So mobx knows whenever something in the state is changed. It doesn't matter when. And then it will run all of the updates depending on the dependency tree. So, like, if I'm not mistaken, it will just work out of the box, but we need to make sure.
And there's one more. What is the limit for high traffic in the declarative code?
The limit here is, if I understood correctly, like if the state counter is more than bigger or equal than 10, it will show high traffic alert. Let's put it as 15 and test it out. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, then it will be +5 and we still don't see it. And here, sorry. So in 12 it won't work and 17 it does. I hope, did I answer the question? I'm not sure. Because what I did is I declared like a property on the state is high traffic, which is basically a Boolean. And I've set the text of the element traffic, which is this one, to be is high traffic, otherwise just an empty string. Any more questions?
That's it for now. You can continue.
All right. So we said it's per quote compatible. You can use it in their vine together and apart, whatever you want. It supports, I guess. I don't know. Or supports. I don't know. Ratio fix me. Declarative programming, which means, like I hope I convinced you, which is that the declarative programming is better than imperative programming. It's built on top of a very popular open source mobx. You can check out their documentation, and we kept the same API. This is important because we don't want to hide it. We want you to learn mobx and use mobx. And all we did was to give you this nice abstractions and interface for Velo. So the bind that has the autocomplete, and it knows all of the types, and it knows that it has a text, which needs to be a function. This is what we mainly did. The rest is basically it's a solved problem, right? The community of programmers around the world solved it, and we just used it. That's we didn't want to solve it again. We didn't want to invent the wheel. It's less prone for errors, like I explained. Imperative usually follows code duplications or just to forget to update whenever something is changed that something else is dependent on. So declarative, you only write what you want to do, so it's less prone for errors. There's no code duplication like we saw. In my opinion, we're entering the realm of opinions, but in my opinion, it's cleaner, it looks neater, and it produces shorter code. So maybe this was like a small example, so you don't see that it's much shorter than this code. But again, my opinion, I really prefer this kind of writing instead of the previous one. And lastly, it's built by the Velo team. So we would really appreciate your feedback, and we promise to keep improving it if we will see traction and the community will really embrace it. Then we will know that we can continue and maybe add it as a default to a new site whenever someone turns dev mode on, or I don't know what we will see in the future from that library, from this library, but that's why like we really need your feedback and your opinion. So to summary, basically that's it. Summary, we talked about a little bit about what's imperative, what's declarative, also in real life and also in programming. Okay, now I want to show you the velo-bind doc site. So I mentioned that velo-bind is open source. So you can see it here under Wix incubator in GitHub. There's a Velo project. Currently, the only package in the open source is velo-bind. So you can see the README and you can go to the documentation site. And here we have everything like laid out, explained. Again, like any feedback also on the documentation. Remember, this is like a work in progress. It's a very like, it's kind of a side project of the Velo team, okay? So treat it as such. It's working and everything is production ready, but it's still like in the early days. So you can see some examples. We can also support repeaters. We also support repeaters, so you can work with the repeaters and velo-bind, which is pretty cool. You can see the full example of the counter that we showed. And yeah, that's pretty much it for now. So again, I said it many times during the presentation, but let us know what you think, either on Discord or GitHub. You can open issues. Twitter, X, how do you want to call it? Threads, are we on Threads?
Wix is on Threads, yes.
Yeah, nice. Okay. That's it basically. So any questions?
Awesome, thank you so much. Yes, we do have a few questions. The first one, does it support input change of value out of the box?
Input change, I mean, you need to, just like on click, you need to set the input on change and then do whatever you want, change the state, and it will reflect the page, like all the elements that depends on the input. Let's say I have an input and a text, and the text shows the input. So we need to go to the input on change the state, and we'll bind the text element to the state. It works exactly as it would work in mobx. And for those of you who don't know mobx, which is fine, like I didn't know mobx, definitely not in a really good way before we wrote this library. Like I first seek out examples in mobx and then use it in velo-bind, because like I said, it's completely the same. It's the same.
All right, are you ready for the next question?
Yes.
Awesome. Next question is, how do you support collapse and expand operation?
I will need to get back to that. I don't know. Like, what is the problem with collapse and expand? Maybe I missed something. What's the difference between? Okay, let's say I want to call, I don't know, like I want to hope that we just exposed it. Like here, when you say text, you can also, let's say for something collapsible, you can just collapse. But I'm not sure. It's a really great question and I will write it down.
Okay, next question is, what's the missing feature you wish to add in the future?
It's a nice one. So like where I see it going, if the community will approve and it will be something that we will see some traction and people will use it, is to, like I said, like change the default templates maybe, add more autocomplete options, and just in general make the code as easy as it can be. There's one thing that currently is not supported. Usually when you write mobx applications like standalone websites, the state or the store, it depends on which state management you use, is shared between the pages. Currently in velo-bind, it doesn't. So if you have a state, you can't share it between the pages. But hopefully in the future we will solve it. Like we have some ideas and we just didn't get to it yet.
Next question is, does have the declarative programming some impact on performance? Like, would it slow down the speed somehow of processing in comparison of using imperative programming?
Okay, so this is a trick question, because the real answer is probably yes. But there's a big but. The but is, it's like assembly, okay? So I can ask the same question between like, does writing in, let's say, C# or C++ or whatever language you want, affect performance versus assembly? And the real answer is yes, because assembly will be the fastest and the most efficient software you can probably write, because it's like you control every instruction to the CPU. On the other hand, it's much more difficult to write a fully performant assembly code, which will implement the perfect algorithm, and it's much easier to write a performant code in C++. So it's kind of the same here. If you write it imperatively and you do it perfectly and you only change whatever you need, it will probably work better. But my guess that it won't be noticeable, maybe a few milliseconds, because there is an overhead of the velo-bind library, right? Code is running equal time. However, in the grand scheme of things, the code is shorter, so you need less to download from the network. The code is more bulletproof. It's more bug-proof. You won't forget things because you just tell the software what to do. And like I said, it won't run every time. Only like the text here will happen only when counter is changed. So I think it's negligible. Like the difference will be very, 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 very small, if at all, but yeah.
Next question. Considering the user base of Wix are mostly no or low code users with minimal coding experience, as developers, we are often building solutions with that user in mind. Can you suggest ways to write more declarative code within the Velo framework that don't add layers of complexity, such as third-party packages?
So another great question, because we thought about it a lot, like whether or not we wanted to be a third party and then add the overhead of installing it, having to install it. And we finally chose to go that path, because you can think about the $W like the vanilla JavaScript, right? So we have, I guess, most of you know MDN, the Mozilla Developer Network, when it has all the APIs for the underlying vanilla JavaScript engine, right? Like the document, and it's not the JavaScript engine, it's the JavaScript in the ECMAScript in the browser. So we have the document, and we have document.query select and everything. And this one will currently will never change, maybe somewhere in the future. But this is our atomic units. And on top of that, a lot of amazing and very and very talented people wrote some really famous frameworks like Angular and React and mobx and Redux, and they all use underlying, like underneath their code, they use the same native APIs. So this is how we see it. Like the velo-bind still uses the native APIs of Velo, which is the $W and everything. But hopefully, like people will see that it's much more simpler to write code with velo-bind, and then like adding the package won't be so bad.
All right, we have 2 questions left, but if you have anything else that comes to mind, feel free to keep asking. So the next question, can we share state between different pages?
Yeah, so I touched it a little bit before. Currently, it's a limitation. We are aware of it, but yeah, so currently it's not possible, but hopefully in the future we have some ideas on how to fix it, and we will get to it sometime soon.
All right, and then this next question, can you talk a bit more about mobx?
Yeah, sure. So mobx is, like I said, it's a library. You can install it from NPM. By the way, you don't have to use velo-bind. You can just install mobx and just use plain native mobx, but it won't be as cool as this, hopefully. So it's, like it says, it's a simple, scalable state management. The thing that mobx does the best is to create observables, which is what we saw, the observable objects, and then change the properties and on everything that is dependent on these properties in a performant fashion. You can read a lot, like there's a lot of examples on their website, and I really urge you to look it up, because if you want to write good code in velo-bind, you will have to know mobx. So it's a really good idea just to go over the documentation and try out some of their examples, and then you will understand velo-bind much better.